This is Ali Husman. Ali was born in Iran and grew up in Europe. He studied in Belgium and finished his university studies in Bordeaux, France. In 1991, he moved to the United States and went back to college in San Francisco, California. Ali worked for 18 years in the high-tech industry and finished his career at IBM Corporation. He traveled the world extensively, speaks several languages, and prides himself in approaching everyone from a multicultural and unique point of view. He is a graduate of St. Edward's University with a master's in counseling and is a licensed professional counselor and licensed marriage and family therapist. So without further ado, here's Ali.
Good morning. Thank you for the intro, Steph. Glad that it is recording. I'm going to have my wife listen to it later on and go, that's a cool intro. Very cool. All right. Well, this morning, we're going to spend some time talking about how cancer diagnosis affects the world from a child's perspective. I work for an organization called Wonders and Worries here in town. Some of you might have heard of us. Anyone here? Yeah, I see some of you say yes. We're a nonprofit here, and we focus in giving support to families, but mostly children, when a family member, especially a parent, is dealing with an illness, more often than not, in our case, has to do with cancer. We offer free services to our families and the children, and we are located in 4 different offices now around the city, and hopefully, like Starbucks, will be expanding over and over and over. We now have another office in San Antonio and hopefully a few more around Texas before we grow. So let's get started. We're going to really look at this from a child's perspective. So when I'm giving this presentation, I really want you to put yourself in the shoes of a child. What we have known is that there are quite a bit of support for parents dealing with cancer. What there is not enough of is how do we support a child whose parent is going through a diagnosis of cancer. If I may ask, how many of you here have children? Age group? 9? 6 and 1. Any teenagers? How old? 19 and 15. Great. So that's a good range of age that we have here. And we'll go over some of the things for children and teens because it will be a little bit different, obviously. So I'm not going to try to go through every slide because it is Sunday morning and this is not a business meeting. I'll try to make it as interactive as possible. So please stop me at any point if you have any questions. So this is more about Wonders and Worries. About 20% of the people, adults being diagnosed with cancer, have children under the age of 18. And this is where we come in terms of providing support to those families and children. There are 4 things that we know will affect a child when a parent is diagnosed with cancer. Mood changes, academic changes, school, somatic symptoms, and social and interpersonal, right? If we're talking about mood, we're talking about sudden changes in the mood that were not present prior to that. Because if you look at any of these things, most of you would say, no, my kid sometimes goes through these things. That's normal. What we're talking about here is these sudden changes that happen that were not present before. Anger outbursts that didn't happen before. Isolation. They don't want to hang out with their friends anymore. Or suddenly they were straight-A students and they are failing half of their classes, especially if we're talking about teenagers. Or they don't want to go to schools. Or the school nurse calls you 4 times a week saying, your child is again in our office. There is something going on. Or your children suddenly say, my tummy hurts a lot and often. How many of you have had any of those experiences? Yeah, so you'll see that. So these are the things that we're going to be going over. In terms of the teenagers, a little bit different. The schoolwork is disrupted. Yes, the level of anxiety definitely changes. Do you know what is the number one diagnosed mental disorder in the United States for children between the age of 8 and 16? Number one diagnosed. General anxiety disorder. It is the number one diagnosed disorder. We used to say that depression was the common cold. It is now anxiety that is the common cold for children between those ages. It is prevalent. The rate of anxiety in terms of diagnosis has increased by something in the neighborhood of 35% in the past 10 years. So that is something that is prevalent in our children. One thing that is very important to understand, especially with teenagers, is that prior to the diagnosis, your family unit, if you look at it as a circle, this is your family unit with all of you inside that unit. When cancer is suddenly introduced in your family dynamic, it takes center stage. Everything revolves around the diagnosis, medical needs, changes in routines, doctor's appointment, treatments. All these things take center stage. And what you will often see in families is that families suddenly start revolving around the cancer, and everything revolves around that. And that change in that dynamic really affects teenagers and children. And then, so how do we cannot remove cancer, obviously, but how do we displace it so that the family unit remains and the cancer is there, but it is treated differently? We'll talk about that. Fitting with peers. How many here have had, or even in your own life, you want to fit in, especially when you are a teenager? The last thing you want to be in school, believe it or not, is different. The message is be unique, be yourself, be different. But the last thing that you really want is to be that, to be different. You want to be like everybody else. So often you'll find out that even children or teenagers will not share that information with their teachers, with their friends. And most people don't know that they have a parent with cancer, and nobody knows about that. So how do we parents help our children when that happens? I'll talk about that as well. Let's see. Any questions? Let me know if you have any questions as we talk. No? Okay. What are some of the things that helps families when they are dealing with this? Strong communication skills. That is an important aspect of the dynamic within the family. So from my perspective as a therapist, if I find out or understand after interacting with the parents that communication is something that is difficult internally within the family, then I definitely coach them, help them, because that's what they're going to be doing with their children. If they have difficulty doing it, doesn't matter how much work I do with the child at home, if the parents are not communicating clearly, honestly, openly with the children, it makes it very difficult. A good social support, a good network, a good circle of friends, families, getting the school involved, your community involved, really, really helps when you're dealing with an illness and helping with your children. Things as simple as, I cannot take my kid to all their activities. Maybe friends can help do that so that the child's life is not disrupted. Things like that. Strong attachment between the children and their parents, right? Some of you familiar with some of the attachment styles. Anxious attachment style, secure. So if the child feels secure, they have no issue in terms of distancing themselves from a parent because they know what to expect from their mom or their dad if they're not there or when they come back. Anxious would mean they don't know what's going to happen. So if you have to go to treatment centers 2-3 times in a week or in a month and the child doesn't know what's going on, how do you think they're feeling when you're coming back? They're going to be very anxious about it. So this is an important piece as well. And the illness, from a child's perspective, will impact communication, emotions, and coping. And we're going to go through each one of them one by one. So communication. What is our instinct as parents when it comes to our kids? Is to protect them, to care for them, to love for them. The last thing we want to share with them or tell them is something that's going to scare them, they're going to worry about. So what do we do sometimes? We don't say anything. You have no idea how many parents I've dealt over the years who say, I don't want to say anything to my kid. I don't want to disrupt their life. I don't want to scare them. I prefer they don't find out about it. I just tell them I'm just not feeling well or I'm sick and I'm going to the doctor and I'm going to be better. Have you had any friends mention that to you or even suggest that to you? These are some things that you see often. Our instincts to protect is natural. It is an instinct. We're born with it. We want to do that. But in this case, it's the last thing we want to do. It is the time at that point to be honest. Obviously, age appropriate. I would not communicate with a child who's 5 years old in the same way I would with a 15-year-old or a 17-year-old. And I'll show you how some of the things that you can say when you're dealing with your children. Trust and open communication. That's a big one for children. Again, we're looking at it from a child's perspective. If the child doesn't know what's going on with a parent, all they know is, I am sick. But then they see physical changes. They see things that they don't understand. They see you gone for a long period of time. Or suddenly, because you have done chemotherapy, your hair falls off. They don't understand why that has happened. Or you need to leave for another treatment center away for a week. What do you think goes in their mind? What are kids really good at? Imagining things, right? But if they don't understand what's going on, what are they going to imagine? You said it. What? Worst case scenarios. But the thing is, it's in our nature to do that. We're all wired that way. We're all wired to think worst case scenarios. When we worry about the worst case scenario. When we worry, we're not going to be optimistic about it. We're going to think of what is the worst that can happen. That's how we are wired. Our brain is wired that way. It's to protect us. It's to predict potentially something that can happen pretty bad so we can protect ourselves now from it. But we're terrible at predicting. That's the unfortunate thing. But children are in the same way. They're going to be doing the same thing. They're going to be thinking about the worst case scenario. You have no idea how many times I've had parents in remission who suddenly just have the flu or a bad cold and they need to go see a doctor. And it triggers the child because they were not told years ago what was happening, and now they think that mom or dad are going to the doctor and they're reliving exactly the same thing that they experienced before because they were not told what happened. So it is very important to maintain that communication, that honesty with our children when we're dealing with cancer. How many of you honestly shared with your child, I have cancer? How early? On the day of the diagnosis, a week after? How long after?
After the surgery.
After the surgery. So that was a little while after.
It was a month.
A month.
Diagnosed and then surgery in a month.
Okay.
So that month, everything was quick.
Very quick. Okay. How about you?
Just a couple of weeks before I started chemo.
A couple of weeks before you started chemo? And then how long after the diagnosis?
Less than a month.
Less than a month after? Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Did anybody did not share? Did not say anything? Okay. All right. What we want to focus on as parents is not really protect our child, but protect our relationship with them. The bond that we have, the trust that we have, the connection that we have with them. That's what we want to protect in this case. The other thing that happens often is your children, once they find out, want to protect you. Do you see what I mean by that? They want to protect you. How can they do that? How do you think they would do that? Exactly. By not telling you that they're sad or they're upset. What else?
Trying to help you.
Trying to help you.
Trying to
Exactly.
lift you up.
Lift you up. How about for teenagers? What would they do, you think? That's one, absolutely. Another one that you see often is what we call role changes. They become the parents. I've worked a lot with single parents. And when they have several children, the oldest child becomes the parent for the little ones because mom or dad cannot do a lot of the things that they were able to do before, and they need help. But then that teen is suddenly driving his or her siblings around, helping around the house, and those role changes makes it very, very difficult sometimes for teenager. Come on in, don't worry about it. No. It makes it very difficult for teenagers to cope and maintain their own routine and normal life like they would do. So it's important for us to be aware of that, and when we see that, clarify that and change that. How about nonverbal communication, especially with the youngest one? How well do you think they can read you? Pretty well, right? Yes. You know, we're all born. If you remember your baby's babies, right? Do you remember holding your baby in your arms like that and looking at their face and smiling and making silly faces? Do you remember what their face was doing? Mimicking exactly the same thing. That's an instinct. We're born with those mirror neurons in our brain as a child, as a survival tool, to be able to read our environment. But as we grow older, we don't use them as much, and then you become an adult like myself, and you pay thousands of dollars to go get trained to learn how to use it again, right? But it comes naturally to us. So children, especially the young ones, they can read you like a book. Give you an example. They come to you and then look at you and you go, "You okay, Mom?" And you go, "I am. I'm doing fine." How many of us do that? What do you think the child is hearing? I'm sorry?
Lies.
Well, they're getting mixed messages.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're seeing them crying, and then they're hearing, "Oh no, I'm fine," and they're like, "Well, but so why are you crying when you're fine?" And they don't. There's a disconnect between.
There's the disconnect. Absolutely. Absolutely. They cannot match the facial expression with what you're saying. So it creates what for them? Confusion. And when it creates confusion, they worry. They're like, "What's going on here? I don't understand why Mom is saying I'm fine, but her face is saying something completely different." Then they cannot match it. And you do that long enough, then they cannot understand when things are actually not going well because they don't know how to react or respond to it, right? So when we're not feeling well, what do?
You tell them.
Yeah, I'm not feeling good. I'm hurting. I'm tired. I need some time for myself. Has nothing to do with you. You haven't done anything. I'm just not feeling well right now because of whatever has happened. Okay? How many of you here after chemotherapy felt like you could go run a half marathon? Not a lot of us, right? Well, it's okay for a child to know that. I just had treatment. I'm not feeling good. It makes my body really tired. My body hurts. I need to rest. I'd love to spend some time with you when I feel better, or if you want to hang out with me, that's okay, but I won't be able to do much with you. I hope you understand. What do you think your child's going to say at that point? Okay, I get it. I understand, right? So as long as they know it has nothing to do with them, they understand what's going on with you, then it makes it easier for them. It matches. How many of us as adults, when we don't know something, we worry about? Or when we don't understand something, we worry about? Unknown creates what? Anxiety and fear. Two different things, but yes, I agree. Definitely. So for a child, it's the same thing. When they don't understand something, when they don't see something, it creates that same anxiety internally for them, right? Questions that children ask themselves when a parent is diagnosed with cancer. What's going to happen to my mom? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to our family? What's going to happen to our life, to our routine, the things that I do? Are we moving? Are we staying? What is going on? After surgery, what happened to mom? Why is she looking like this? How many of you here, if you went through treatment, had a port put in? Okay? How many of you showed the port to your children? What did they say? I'm very curious.
Our daughter was 2 and she thought it was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
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 My son already understood because he had a port off.
Okay.
He's going through treatment as well.
He was going as well. Yeah. Yeah. So he understood completely.
He understood completely, and we talked about how the ports were on the same side.
Mhm.
And compared our ports.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just said, as their mom, that they came from this.
Yeah. Yeah. Did anybody let them touch it? Yeah. Right? Yeah. In our mind, sometimes we create the worst case scenario. If I show them, they're going to freak out, they're going to worry, but they're curious by nature. So they want to understand what that is. In our offices, we actually have these medical dolls that have real ports on them. And so part of when we do the illness education with the children to see what cancer is and everything, we actually give them a real port and they just play around with it. And then we give them, with care, these needles the way that they would do it in the treatment centers. And then they would actually pretend that they are treating the doll. And they put a medical vest on and they do play therapy basically with that. And they familiarize with themselves with what a parent is going through. And then the first thing they do when they come out is, Mom, let me show you what I did. Let me see, I know what this is, I understand it. What happens to their anxiety at that point? It's gone, right? Because they understand it, right? So children have a lot of questions that they wonder, they ask, and just because they're quiet doesn't mean that they're okay, right? There's an old saying that says, a quiet child is not a happy child, right? Doesn't mean that because they're quiet that everything is just fine, right? So we need to attune ourselves sometimes to those nonverbal cues that our children show us. So the illness education piece of it. Any of you had a chance to actually explain cancer to your child or your children? You did? How did you do it? I'm curious.
So my son is 3.
Uh-huh.
But he, I stay at home with him,
Mm-hmm.
so our routine changed pretty significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of people coming and going, staying with us, so he overheard a lot. And
Uh-huh.
so he started asking questions about death and dying,
Uh-huh.
and so I tried to, I told him, I was like, Mommy has an illness.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, because I wanted to differentiate that from Mommy being sick.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't look sick, I can still do most things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm metastatic, so it's, it's a different conversation. But I said, Mommy has an illness. She goes to the doctor for treatments, and that, Mommy has a disease called cancer. You might hear, and I'm really open with him, and I use the language that he's going to hear in the
Mm-hmm.
house.
Yeah.
And I don't want him to feel like it was something that was hidden from him. And I said, and that means that sometimes parts of my body aren't working the way that they should. And sometimes Mommy feels bad, and sometimes she has pain. I said, sometimes like when you bang your elbow, you have pain. And sometimes Mommy has that in different parts of her body.
Mm-hmm.
And then so he went and he grabbed his pacifier and he goes, well, this will help you feel better.
Yeah. So you see what just happened there, right?
Well, and so I got us both. He has a little stuffed animal Lovey, and so I had a second one, and he gave it to me, and he said, "This will help you feel better when you're scared, or when you, when you need. It'll help you feel better. It'll help you calm down."
Mm-hmm.
And so he kind of helped. He put himself in that role as
To protect.
to be a kind of a support system.
Yeah.
And so we talk about it. Like if I go to the doctor, when I had a hysterectomy, I showed him my scars and my bandages, and I said, these are Mommy's boo-boos. Mommy had an operation, so that's why Mommy was at the hospital. And so we talked about my recovery process, and I mean, he's my only kid. I'm not going to have.
No, and I love your honesty with your child, and I think that's wonderful. And I think you did great with him doing that, and then using actually the term cancer, right? When we're talking about it, is to say, use the word cancer. It's not I'm just sick or I have an illness, because what does that mean? So when I have a cold, is that the same thing? No, it's not. I have an illness called cancer. That's what's causing what's happening to me. That's what it is, right? So it is important to use the actual term, with the children as young as 3 or 4. Now, will they exactly understand what cancer is and what all those things are? No, but actually knowing the term, the word, helps you then explain a lot of things afterwards, right? Things that I would be careful, especially with the younger children, you said, that is just be careful when we say, well, I have boo-boos, right? And that's why I'm feeling like this. Then the child, when they have a boo-boo, careful, because they're going to go, am I going to feel the same thing, or do I have to have also an operation or surgery? So just explain to them what clearly those things were. I just had surgery. They had to do sort of remove or do this, or for the treatment, to put the port in, for example, when you have a scar. Just explain it to them in simple terms, right? And with younger children, what is often needed when you're trying to explain something? Yes, books, pictures, material, definitely. And I have a whole list of them there. Yeah, I have a whole list in the presentation when you look at it, and titles of books that you can use to help and read with them as well. So I think it's part of the app. All the presentation is there, and the list of the books are in there as well. But it is very, very important just to be clear with them that it is cancer, not call it something else. I'm just sick, or I'm not feeling well, or boo-boo or something. But what is very, very important with children is repetition, right? Repetition, 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 especially with the younger children. How many of you have tried to sometimes explain something with your young child, and they look at you, and after a few minutes, they're like, I'm done, right? What do you think they're saying? Are they disrespectful? No. What makes them do that? Overwhelmed. They're like, whoa, way too much information. I need to go process this. Let me go play for a little bit, and I'll come back. You'd be amazed when we do play therapy, for example, when we're doing the illness education, how often the young children get up right in the middle of it, and they just turn around, look around the room, and then just gravitate towards a play, a doll, or an activity. And they just go, and then you just watch them, or a sand tray, for example, and they just process it in their own language. Play is their language. That's how they do it. Yes?
How do you, so I didn't use the terminology.
Uh-huh.
How do you go back now?
Mhm.
And is it best to go back to address it individually per child, or get them together?
That's a great question. What's the age difference?
1, 4, and 6.
Okay, so 1, too young at this point. 4 and 6, you could probably have them together if you want. But it's okay to go back and tell them, make a scrapbook, for example, and then make a story about it. We do that sometimes with the families. Like, you create a story, the story of my cancer, and then the children participate in that. They put their own thing. I remember when you did this, or I remember. And as you're doing that, they can process it, and you can explain it to them so that it clarifies for them what happened to mom back then. The last thing that we want is for them to go for years not understanding what happened, and then be triggered by something and trying to process it at another time, which might be very difficult for them. And also, what that creates in terms of the relationship between you and your child. You didn't tell that to me. You did not share that to me. So next time, you're not going to say anything to me, so I don't trust. So trust can become an issue at that point, right? I see that sometimes when parents don't say anything, and then they have to go to the doctor for a routine check for something, and then the children worry because they're like, oh my God, she's going to go have some sort of surgery. I remember she was gone for a week after she left. Is she going to come back, right? So does that answer your question? Okay, great. Thank you. Great question. So, answering children's question. Do you remember any of the questions that your children asked you?
The main one is, are you going to die? And how do you answer that? You don't want to
Yeah.
but you don't want to say no.
Yes. Yeah. That's a tough question. Yes. I'll come back to that one in a second. Any other questions?
That was my kid asked that too.
That's that. Oh, yeah. All right. So what do you think they're actually asking you?
Are you going to leave?
Are you going to leave me? Am I going to be alone? What's next?
Exactly.
The future. What's the future?
Yeah. So as parents, one of the things that we do is when children ask this question, we have a tendency as parents just to answer the question. Right? An example that I use often is there was a period of my life where I used to work close to 12 hours a day, and my routine with my daughter back then was every morning I would get up and have breakfast with her, and we would talk about our day, and then she would go to school and I would go to work, and in the evening I would not see her because I would come back too late. So one morning she turns at the table and looks at me and goes, Dad, are you going to come home late again tonight? What was I going to say, you think? Yes, I'm coming home late again tonight. Did I answer the question? No, because that was not the question. What was the question? Yes, well said. Yeah. I haven't seen you in a while. I miss not playing with you at night. I love when you read books to me at night. I need more time with you. Are you going to come home early, basically, in her own way? That's what she was asking. So if I answer her, yes, I'm going to be home late, she's going to say, well, I already knew that.
You're leaving me empty.
You're not answering. But they're children. They don't know how to kind of ask you those questions a little bit more in details. So all I said was, you know what? You're right. I've been working a lot. How about today, when you come home, since I'm not going to be home because I'm coming home late, think of something you want to do with me this weekend. And anything you want to do this weekend, I'm all yours. We'll spend the whole weekend and we do whatever you feel like. Biggest smile I've seen on her face after that. That's the question that she was asking. So when children ask, are you going to die? That's not what they're asking. So if I'm looking at them, I would say, what would I need to do at that point before I even answer the question? You remember? I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I don't know, I didn't make this
No, go ahead.
At the same way, but my son is 6.
Uh-huh.
Interestingly enough, he did not ask me about doing that, but instead he worded it in a very strange way. He approached me and he says, you know, are you going to be around when I'm 16?
Uh-huh.
I have also my stomach.
Yes.
So I was like, well, you know, I'm kind of curious because it kind of came out of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, what do you mean am I going to be around? And he's like, well, I want to know if you're going to be here when I'm 16.
Mm-hmm.
So at first I was like, well, what's a 16?
Uh-huh.
Now I'm just curious, like, why you pick 16? And he's like, well, so I can drive because he's all about cars. So I was like, okay.
My kind of kid.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think I was so caught off guard. And I kind of knew, I think, where he was coming from. So my response at the time is like, I really hope so. I wasn't really sure, and I think I wasn't prepared to have that conversation.
Yes.
But I kind of had to give him like something.
Yes.
So I just kind of, as we were talking, it was interesting because he flat out being like, hey, are you be here with us?
Mhm.
Like, you know, it was.
Yeah.
So,
Indirect way of asking something, right? Yeah. So instead of saying, and I'm going to come back, saying that's something I would like you to memorize, instead of saying, I hope so, what can you say instead?
I'll try to be.
I'm here with you now.
I like that. Being more present, that's one.
I said, I'll always be with my heart. So no matter really, even if I'm not here, and that you're trying.
Will that clarify or make it more confusing? I'm confused just at my age, and I'm way too old, right? Like that. I'm doing everything I can, right? I'm taking care of myself. I'm doing my treatments. I'm doing all the things that I can to make sure I can be there. But the reality is, I don't know. It's hard for us adults to say, I don't know, especially to our children. Learn to say it a lot. It's okay. I don't know. I wish I could answer that question, but right now I don't know. What I know is I'm here now, and I'm doing everything in my power to take care of it. Does that make sense? When we say, I hope so, or I'll be with you, in my heart, creates confusion. It's like you're not really answering my question. Why are you creating diversion by saying these things? Makes it more difficult for them to be clear in their mind. Does that make sense? Great.
But in the moment, depending on what is going on, and usually there's a lot going on,
Yes.
isn't it easier to just say, no, I'm not going to die?
Okay, so let me ask you this question, and that's a very great point. Regardless of our cancer diagnosis, if I ask you, all of you here, can you, every single one of you, put a $100 bill on the table and guarantee me that I'm going to get home safely and nothing's going to happen to me? We can't. We can't. And that's the reality of it. But what do I have is now, right now, the moment, being present with my child, being right there, that I have. That's the French side. We're very existentialist, sorry. We're very much more in the moment. Future will come, eventually, right? There's an old author in France I love, and one of the things that he said was, if the future feels overwhelming, and it is, and it creates anxiety for you, know one thing, that it will come to you one moment at a time. So what you have is that moment. That's all we have, right? So the other thing I also want to highlight is, that's one of the reasons why you're here today, is we cannot wing these conversations. We need to be prepared. We need to rehearse some of these conversations in our mind and prepare ourselves just in case they happen, because they're important ones, especially with teenagers. Because teenagers, by definition, don't want to talk to us much. But when they do, that's our opportunity to do it. Okay? Looking at my time. When children don't ask, we need to be attuned with them when they're not asking anything, when they're internalizing things. Some of our children are a lot more expressive. You'll know when they're upset. Others, they'll internalize. We need to be attuned to that. Develop a routine for sharing information, with, especially with the younger children. One of the things that we help families with, say, do a weekly powwow. So like you pick a day, the kids know what day it is, and on that day, you spend 15, 20 minutes, or 30 minutes at most, sharing about anything, any changes, any new treatments, or if you need to do something, routine or changing, or anything that you can clearly communicate with your children so that they're aware of the changes potentially that can come. Children do not like change. They like routine, right? As much as we adults want to say we don't like routine, but we all enjoy it, because routine creates what? For children, what does it create? Stability and safety, right? Change, not as much. So then use materials, and you have a whole list of them in the presentation. You'll see that are very, very helpful, and how to use them as well. Let's see. Use the word cancer. We talked about that. The way we explain it is, talk about healthy cells, right? Say, our body's made out of cells. My healthy cells constantly change. Create new ones, grow new ones. I use little Legos sometimes. And I say, when you scratch your skin, the skin cells are gone, so your body's going to create new one. So you're going to see new skin being created. Those are your healthy cells working for you. And then you have something called cancer cells. Those don't have a job. Our healthy cells have a job. Your skin cells, all they do is skin cells. Your cells for your hair or nails or organs, they all have a job. Cancer cells, they don't have a job. They don't know what to do. All they know is they grow, and they turn other healthy cells into cancer cells, and it damages my body or my organs, and that's why I need to get treatment to get rid of these cancer cells. I mean, this is very simply put, that's one way to explain it. You can use felts like this or Legos to explain it with younger ones, right? But it's also important to find out what the child or the teen knows already about cancer, right? So in their mind, they might have a whole different idea of what cancer is. So I'd like to know what they know about it, so at least I can clarify the things that are false. You know what's the number one thing that I get asked by children, younger one especially?
Is it contagious?
Yes. You have no idea how many times over the years I had to answer that question. Is it contagious? It's a fair question. Yes. Go ahead.
I can kind of see that, because everything they've dealt with before has been don't go hang out with little Johnny. He's got a cold. You'll catch it. Oh, don't go to. You can't go to school. You've got chicken pox.
Mhm.
The other kids will catch it.
Mhm.
Everything they have to associate with when somebody's sick is catching.
Yeah. And then here's the tricky part. Even though you're going to share with your child or even your teens that it is not contagious, but sometimes when you just had radiation or chemotherapy or you had surgery and your immune system is compromised, what do you need to do? Protect yourself. You cannot have your children, you cannot drink out of your children's glasses, for example. You cannot share things with them while you're going through all this. Well, guess what that means to them? It's contagious. That's why I cannot do those things. So we need to clarify that for them. It has nothing to do with cancer being contagious. Is because my white cells, my immune system that protects me right now because of the treatment, be it radiation, chemotherapy, or after the surgery, is not working as well as it was. It's getting better, but right now I have to be very careful because I could easily catch something like a bad cold or the flu or something like that, so I have to be very careful. It doesn't mean that cancer is contagious. I just have to be careful then. We need to clarify because otherwise our behaviors, again, do not match what we had just said after saying that cancer is not contagious. Does that make sense? Good. Yes?
What about if they ask if they're going to get it?
Oh, that's a great question. So what do we say then? Go ahead. You said it. I don't know. I don't know. Because, there are cancers we know have genetic factor to them. Breast cancer with BRCA1 testing, for example, with young girls. We know some of these can potentially, be detected early on. But for most other cancers, we don't know. We just don't know. Yes?
When you say I don't know, is it good or bad to add on? But if you do, you'll be okay.
So can you guarantee that?
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
But mentally maybe be okay.
Uh-huh.
Not saying specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that's very important is when children ask these questions is they don't really want that answer. What they want is for us to validate and reflect what triggered that question. So for example, go ahead and ask me that question again. I'm sorry? Yeah, go ahead. Just ask me, for example. I can tell that you're really worried about it. It's something that worries you because I had cancer. You worry that you're going to have it. That's it. And when I'm meeting my child there, sometimes magic happens. You see their face go, wow, she got me. Like she really understands what I'm experiencing, what made me ask that question. And then the floodgates can open, and then they start sharing the worries that they have, the fears, the thing that they've been thinking about. That's when it happens. Validating and reflecting your child especially when they're asking questions, important questions, is very, very important. Yes?
What if magic doesn't happen? They just continue looking at you, waiting for the rest of that things in their mind.
What do you mean?
Well, you said, I see you're worried about that.
Yeah.
And they go,
You
want to give me a little more? Or,
all I'm doing is just saying, so for example, I know you're confused. It confuses you. I can tell. You would like to have more information.
What questions do you have? Do you have questions? I don't know. My son, he will tell me, oh, I have this. He just, now, if we think he's very concerned issues.
Uh-huh.
I need to go to the doctor and get it checked.
Yeah. Yeah.
He starts having this.
That's a sign of anxiety, right? That's a sign of anxiety saying that when these things happen, he's worried, he's getting triggered, right? So we need to match where he is. Go, I know you're anxious when you get sick or you cut yourself or something happens that you're worried that you're going to get something serious.
Nothing.
Yeah. It's hard, I know. It's very hard.
It doesn't make sense to me.
You're confused.
Yes. I am. Like, she'd be like, yeah. It's almost like, cool story, bro.
Like, you're not really answering the question, I guess. So
The kid's asking you, will they get cancer? You don't know.
Or are they
You
come,
don't know.
I need to go to the hospital, I got a paper cut, or...
So what would help you to feel better?
The kid, it just seems weird to me to be, like, if I ask somebody a question,
Uh-huh.
no, I'm an adult, so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understand that, and they just went, yeah, you're pretty anxious about that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a therapeutic reason why you don't want to get into it with your children more? Like expanding? Is there a reason? Like,
So let me see if I can, yeah. So let me see if I can answer it that way. And then if that doesn't answer your question, then I'll be happy to go a little bit more in detail with it. How many of you go pick up your kids at school in the car line? Okay. When they get in the car, what do you ask them? How was your day? What do you get? Fine. What else do you ask?
boring.
Yeah. What else do you ask them? And what do they say? Nothing. Okay. What else do you ask? One more.
Well, I asked them what the best part of their day was and what the hardest part of their day.
And what do you get?
Well, the best part is usually that I got to hang out with my buddy.
Okay.
And the hardest part was, someone took a toy from me.
Uh-huh. So these are not very long conversation, are they? They're almost monosyllabic type of conversation. How was your day? Good. What did you do? Are you tired? Yeah. Do you have a lot of homework? Yes. So when you ask questions, especially children, the first thing they want to do is say, they're going to keep asking me questions. So the quicker answer I give them, the faster they're going to stop asking me, right? Well, the reverse goes the same way. They ask you a question, you just answer a quick question. Like, well, I'm not quite satisfied with what you just said. I wanted more to that, right? How about if you're in the car and I'm sure you had a long day and you're tired. And I'm sure your kid had a long day and they're tired. And they get in the car and you say something like, I cannot wait to get home, put my PJs on, sit on the couch, and just relax. It's such a long day. I'm exhausted.
Me too, Mommy.
Watch what happens. Me too. And you have no idea what I had to go through today. And Tommy did that. And Mrs. Smith got on my case because blah. And most parents come back to me, Allie, I cannot shut them up now. I didn't ask any questions. I just validated where they were because I knew where they are. And when you do that, you'll get more information than you ever wanted. Children want to be validated and reflected. That's what happens. Does that help?
So when you question your children when you pick them up the car line, because I get those responses.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't ask them how they
Yeah. I mean, think of it. Imagine you get to work. As soon as you sit down at your desk, somebody comes. All right, are you done? How feeling? What time is it? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Say, I haven't had my coffee yet. Back off, right? Well, it's the same, right? Does that make sense now? Yeah? All right. I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, we have about 1 or 2 minutes left, so if we want to wrap it up and
Yeah.
ask a few more questions.
Sure. I want to just make sure I go through some of the things. Some of the language is in the presentation, some of the words that you can use. These presentations are available, right? It is available in the, I saw it in the app. So you'll see all this in there. These are the books. I just want to quickly go and We talked about this, the books on coping. So coping, it's very important to understand how your children cope. You as a parent know what works for your child. For some children is maybe listening to music, others running around, some being with their friends, or cuddling, or just spending quality time with you, or distracting themselves with drawing, or anything like that. Be more attuned with how your child naturally copes. And if that's what works for them, then reinforce, nurture, and cultivate that, because that's how they're going to be able to process it, right? One of the things that I hear often from children and a lot of teenagers is, I have too many things, I have too many activities, right? So it's something that we as parents have to be attuned. You know, when your kids start complaining they have to go to do their activities, that's when they're telling you it's too much, right? Believe it or not, I had a client about 6 months ago, a 13-year-old boy. He was coming from his first baseball practice to my office to have his session, to go then do his second baseball practice, and after baseball practice, go do a piano lesson. And this is after a day of class, and then go home and do homework. Doesn't work, right? So make sure you know your coping skill for your child and nurture that. And then as they grow, those coping skills will change. You know, let's see. And red flag behaviors. So parents, it's really about duration and intensity, right? So some of these things that I'm going to highlight, the red flag behaviors, you know, denial, disbelief, a negative view of the world, self, daydreaming, changing moods, personality, trouble with sleeping or sleeping too much, loss of appetite. All these things are at times normal that a child is going through because maybe certain things have happened in school or at home. But what is important is the duration and intensity of it. Meaning, if this happens for 4 or 5 days in a row and then it stops, then maybe they were able to cope with it and adapt and learn from it and actually build resilience through it. But if it goes on for much longer than that, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and with no signs of getting better, then maybe there's something else that's happening and we need to get them support and help. So it's often parents come to me and go, oh my God, for the past 2 days he's been complaining about his bellyache. And I'm like, how about today? He goes, no, he's fine. Like, all right, then we're good. But if they complain that, I've had parents say he's been in the nurse's office 4 times this past week, 3 times last week, then maybe we have something else going on. It's about duration and intensity. So just keep that in mind. Sorry, I had to rush through this presentation. It was a lot more. I appreciate your interaction, loved it, and thank you so much for spending your Sunday morning here. Thank you.